Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be showing you two different ways of how to color eyes with Copic markers. In the first one I'm doing a blue eye. I'm using B00, B05, B32, B24, B28, and B39 for the darkest shadow. You don't have to necessarily use these colors. These are just the colors I use, but make sure you have a good range of a really light color to a really dark color. So this first eye is going to be kind of like a smooth sort of shine, and the pupil is completely closed in the middle. So I start off with the mid-tone, and then you darken the outer edge, and then blend it all in with like lighter colors. So go from dark to light as you get to the middle of the pupil to make it slightly glow in the middle, just for the style of this. And go in with your lightest color and map out where you want the highlight to be, which for me it was in the top right part of the eye. And then I put a little bit of purple in the opposite from the shine so that it's sort of like the reflected light, so I leave that part light as well as the highlight. And then the bottom of the eye is going to be light as well. So just feather in your colors, going from the mid-tone to your lightest and blending it into the white. You might want to use a colorless blender to smooth out areas between the white and the dark. And then I went in even darker and I kind of outlined the pupil and added a little bit of lines going around the eye, and I'm darkening the area between the light part in the top left of the eye, and then also making it blend into the lighter part at the bottom of the iris. And then I went in with one of my midtones again and feathered away from the middle of the pupil to create those little lines, because in irises they do have lines that go up and down all around the eye. So I kind of did that with my darkest color at the top, and I got lighter at the bottom as I did those little lines. And then the key for this eye is to just keep blending it, just going from your darkest color to your lightest color, and make sure it's nice and smooth, and make sure that the highlight stays white. A colorless blender can help you keep it white and can help you blend it into your darker colors by going from dark, then your middle color, and then your lightest color, and then using the colorless blender to make it all smooth. The colorless blender, I use it mostly to blend things to white or to remove color. That's the best way to use it. And then I went in with my multi-liner and I just corrected the outer edge because it started to look a little bit lopsided. So I just kept darkening the pupil again because the pupil is pretty dark, and I darkened the upper part of it, but I left a tiny little highlight, and then whatever color you leave the little highlight, go back in with that same color to blend it into the darker color. And for the white of the eye, I used a purple, like a grayish purple color, and I went over it with a purple. The colors I used were BV31 and one of the lighter cool grays, so like C1 or C2 or C3. And I'm just using skin tones, so EO4 was my darkest color, and I used EO2 as my second darkest color, and my lightest color was E000. And this isn't really like part of the tutorial, it just kind of finishes off the eye. It's not really a skin tutorial, but I kind of just use the same sort of technique where you lay down your dark color, blend it out with your middle color, and then use your very lightest color to blend everything out to be a lighter where the highlights go. And I just kept blending and layering the colors, and especially where the crease of the eye happens is where you want the darkest of the color to be. In the middle of the eyelid you want to leave lighter than the rest of the eye. And I just colored the eyebrow brown, just because most people's eyebrows are at least a shade of brown, because if your hair is brown then your eyebrow will be brown. And I'm just fixing up the skin and trying to blend it out from the crease of the eye, which is where the darkest shadow happens. And now I'm just correcting everything with my white gel pen. It's one of those Sakura Jelly Roll ones, and I'm adding kind of like square shaped highlights at the top of the eye, and just going over it, making sure it's nice and white, because sometimes the gel pen can absorb the Copic color and then it's dark, and once it dries you can go over it again and it becomes whiter again. I'm using the colorless blender to blend out the light color to the color of the paper. And now I'm just using it to do a little squiggly line at the bottom with a few dots for highlights, just to kind of help the whole shininess of the eye come across. So that's what it looks like in the end. Now here's the brown eye. I use E000, E23, E35, E37, E77, and E29. And I also use a lot of the same whites of the eye color, like the grays and the purple, and I use pretty similar skin colors. So the difference between this eye and the eye before is that the pupil is not closed, so that means the pupil is going to blend into the eye, and it's kind of a slightly different style of coloring and a different kind of way of drawing eyes that people do sometimes. So I left the upper part of the eye darker than the other one. I didn't really leave a highlight because the highlight for this one is going to come in with the jelly roll, the gel pen. So the biggest style for this eye is you taking your marker and doing small lines coming out of the pupil. And this just makes it a little bit more realistic and a little bit more, more of like an impact when you look at it, especially if you start darkest, go a little bit lighter, and leave your lightest color for the center of the shine, and that's what makes it look really shiny and nice. So I'm using, I started with the darkest color and I'm blending it out with one of my lighter colors. And you can also go from the outside of the iris to the inside, and it helps to leave a little bit of the middle part of the eye without any lines on it. Just otherwise it'll start to look more too detailed and like too much is going on. So I kind of blended all the soft lines together, and I go back in with my darker color and I make it look a lot sharper. So after you have your base lines, then you want to go over it again, and that just makes it a lot more sharp and more detailed looking without it being too smudged or blended. So just use your absolute darkest color and go around the center of the pupil and the outside of the pupil, doing really short feathery strokes to make those lines come up and down. And if you want to make the lines a little bit softer, then go in with a lighter color and blend it out a little bit more, so like extend the line. So I added the shine at the top with my gel pen, and I added a second one beside it. You can get really creative with the shines of the eyes. You can make them whatever shape you want, but usually it would be opposite from the highlight at the bottom of the iris. Just make sure it's like at the opposite side of it if you're going to make it to one side, because that's kind of like the reflected light in this picture anyway. So I went in with my lightest color of brown and I just blended over it again. It kind of covered some of the gel pen, but I still am okay with the way it looked. So I'm using the same skin tones as before. E04 is one of my favorite skin tones just because you can layer any color on it and kind of alter it, because it seems really dark, but once you start layering with it, then it blends into the skin a lot better. So I'm pretty much using the same skin tones, kind of putting the shadows in the same place where the crease of the eye is. You can make them as dark or as light as you want, depending on what colors you are using. Normally you wouldn't feather it out into white because the eye would be on the rest of the face, but this is just a floating eye, so that's why I feathered it out to white with the colorless blender, just so it looked better by itself on the paper. I think the brown eyebrow looks a lot better with this eye because the eye's actually brown. I wanted to make the other eyebrow blue for the other eye, but that wouldn't really make sense because you don't really know what color the hair is. So making a blue eyebrow, just, I don't know, that would assume that their hair is blue and that they dyed their eyebrow blue. So I just stuck with natural colors for both of them. I'm just fixing up all the highlights because, like I said, it can absorb the color and you want to go over it again. So here's what it looks like in the end, and here's the other one. So basically the main difference between them is that the blue one is very smooth and has nice soft shading, and the brown one is a little bit more realistic and it's a little more detailed and it looks more like an actual eye, and the pupil isn't a complete circle, it kind of connects to the top of the iris. So these are very stylized, they're not realistic, this is just two styles that I found. You don't have to do it my way, this is just something that could help you maybe if you don't really know where to start with coloring eyes with Copic markers. And also gel pens, white gel pens are really useful when you're using Copic markers and coloring eyes, because eyes have lots of highlights in them because they're very reflective surfaces. So I hope you got something out of this video, and I hope you found it helpful, and thanks for watching.